Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Daled Amud Aleph. We're on Daf 4a of Meseches Kiddushin. We're in the middle of the page by the two dots where the Gemara says Gufa. The first word on the line is La. So the Gemara says Gufa. Gufa means, we'll look at it itself. Something that we mentioned earlier, we're now going to examine more closely. So earlier, as the Gemara quotes, we said V'yatzach the verse by an Amma Ivriya, by a Jewish maidservant, it said that if nobody marries her, if the father doesn't, if the son doesn't, V'yatzach she goes out free. And the Gemara had a brisa that darshan to learn out Elu Yemei Bagros. When does she go free? When she's a bogeres, which is at 12 and a half years old, she goes out because they haven't they haven't done what they were supposed to do, which was, this was to give her a chance to marry at marriage. And they didn't marry her, so she goes out once she reaches adulthood at 12 and a half. Then the next part of the pasuk is Ein Kesef, there's no money paid. And it says Elu Yemei Nairus. That means she goes out when she's a Naira, when she's 12 years old. So the beginning of the verse teaches us she goes out when she's 12 and a half. And the second half of the verse, or when she's a bogeres at least, when she reaches adulthood, which is normally 12 and a half. And Ein Kesef teaches us she goes out when she is a Naira at 12. So obviously, that doesn't make sense, because if she goes out when she's 12, then she's already free. She's not, she's out already by the time she's 12 and a half. So what does this mean? So that's the Gemara's question. The Lichtov Rachmana Nairus, V'lo Bai Bagrus. Let the Torah just write the words that teach me that she goes out at Nairus, when she's a Naira at 12, and I don't need the part that teaches me that she goes out when she's 12 and a half, when she's a bogeres, because she's already out. So Amar Rabba, Rabba explained, Rabba said, Ba'zeh v'limid al zeh. One came and taught about the other, Midi dahava toshav v'sachir. We find a similar thing by toshav and sachir, which we'll explain in a moment what that is. But what it's saying is, Ba'zeh v'limid al zeh. This one came and taught me about the other one, means as follows. If it had just said one thing, let's say V'yatzach she goes out, and it doesn't tell me when she goes out. When does she go out? So I would say it's when she reaches adulthood, when she reaches Bagrus. If I only had one choice, I would choose full adulthood. That's when she goes out. But now that it said another thing, it said Ein Kesef, and now it's adding something. So what's it adding? Oh, there's another time that she goes out. Actually, she goes out when she's 12. So by saying two things, it means initially say she goes out at when she's a bogeres, like adulthood. But by the fact that there's a second drasha, so now I say, what's that coming to teach me? That she actually goes out at 12. So I needed two things though, otherwise I would have said she goes out at 12 and a half. And it says we have a similar thing by toshav v'sachir. What is that? Literally a toshav is like a dweller, and the sachir is a worker, a hired worker. So what's it talking about? Titania, we learned in a brisa. The brisa is talking about the verse that deals with a Kohen eating truma, eating special, dedicated, sanctified food that only a Kohen can eat, and his family. And the question is, can his Jewish servants, Jewish slaves, eat from it? So a non-Jewish slave is his property, and therefore can eat the truma, because he's like part of the family. But a Jewish slave is not considered property of the owner, and so it teaches me. The pasuk says, "Toshav v'sachir." I'm reading the actual pasuk. The verse says, "Toshav kohen v'sachir lo yochal kodesh." The dweller of a kohen and the worker of a kohen cannot eat the holy food, cannot eat the truma. And the brisa explains, Toshav zeh kanoi kinyan olam. A toshav comes to teach me that a Jewish slave who's acquired forever still can't eat truma, despite the fact that he's acquired forever. Sachir zeh kanoi kinyan shanim. And the sachir is a worker. It's referring to a Jewish slave who is acquired for just a number of years. He also can't eat truma, right? So, as you may know, just like there's the concept of the Jewish maidservant, so there's the concept of the Jewish slave, the Eved Ivri. So an Eved Ivri is someone who he's fallen on hard times, or he's stolen, he owes money, can't pay back. So he sells himself into slavery or into work, and he remains that way for 6 years, and after 6 years he goes free. But if he decides that he loves his master, he wants to stay on, then he gets his ear pierced and he stays on for the rest of his life, really, or maybe until the Yovel, but he stays on. So the pasuk is saying as follows: even though he's a slave, but still he can't eat truma. Now says the Brisa, Yomar tosha v'lo Yomar sachir. Let it say that a tosha, meaning someone who is sold forever, the one who had his ear pierced, he's there forever. So if anything, the fact that he's remaining by the owner until Yovel, I think he still goes out at Yovel, but the fact that he's remaining for a long time, so that implies that he's he's more owned by the master, and yet he still can't eat truma. So certainly the one who is only there for a few years, he's certainly isn't the property of the master and shouldn't be able to eat truma. So the Brisa points this out. It says, let it just teach me that the tosha, the one who's a slave forever, that he can't eat truma. I can figure out that the shorter one, the one who's only there for a few years, can't eat truma. So Yomar toshav or Yomar sachir. Let it say the toshav and not the sachir, not the temporary one. Vani Yomer, and I would say, Kanai kinyan olam eino ochel. Someone who's owned forever can't eat. Kanai kinyan shanim o koshking. Isn't it all the more so that someone who's only temporarily owned, that he's even less property, he shouldn't be able to eat truma? So the Brisa explains, Ilu kain, but had it said that, Hayisi Omer, Toshav zeh kanai kinyan shanim. If I only said one thing, if I only said Toshav, let's say, a dweller, and I didn't know what that meant, so I would say it refers to a kanai kinyan shanim, the temporary one. If I had a choice, then who would I say can't eat truma? The one who's only temporarily owned. He's not really part of the family yet, but somebody who is completely owned, or he's owned for at least what we call forever, or until the Yovel. So he should be able to eat truma. That's why he had to tell me both things, toshav v'sachir, right? I would say aval kanai kinyan olam, but somebody who's owned forever, ochel, he could eat truma. So ba sachir v'limed al toshav. So the word sachir comes to teach me about toshav. She'af al pi shekanai kinyan olam, that even though the toshav is acquired forever, still eino ochel. He still can't eat. So it needed to tell me, because there's 2 degrees, and I would assume the lesser degree. So it had to tell me both, so now I know it's both the first and the second degree. Both the temporarily owned slave can't eat truma, and the permanently owned Jewish slave can't eat truma. And the same thing with us by the age of the maidservant, of the Jewish maidservant going free, of the Amma Ivriya, that if I had just said one thing, I would have assumed that she goes free at the later time, when she's reached full adulthood. That's why I had to say 2 things to teach me. First, you say she goes out at full adulthood. Oh, it says another thing. That teaches me that she actually goes out earlier at the age of 12 already. So Amar le Abaye responded, this was Rava's answer. Abaye said to him, Rabba said this, and Abaye says that back, Mi Dami, are those 2 ideas really comparable? Hasam tre gufininu. In the case of the Jewish slave, of the Eved Ivri, so it's tre gufi, it's 2 different people that are being included. Dikinami kasav Rahman toshav. And he's anticipating a question, right? The question is, if it's true that you can deduce one from the other, so let the verse be more explicit, right? Let the verse say, in the case of the Eved Ivri, let's say, the Jewish slave. So say that the permanent slave can't eat truma, and I can figure out that the temporary one, say it more explicitly. You're right, if it's vague and says toshav, a dweller, and I don't know what that means, then I need to say 2 things. But why doesn't the Torah just say what it's talking about, and say more explicitly that it's talking about a permanent slave, that he can't eat truma, and I can figure out that the temporary slave can't eat truma. So he says over there it's okay, because it's 2 different people, Dikinami kasav rachmana toshav nirtza. Let's say it was explicit. It said toshav nirtza. Nirtza means the pierced one. It said the toshav who's nirtza, the toshav, the dweller who's permanently dwelling, who's permanently a slave. And it said, lo yochal, he can't eat the truma. V'hadar kasav idach. And then it went and wrote also the temporary slave can't eat truma. So havasachir milsadasya v'kavachomer. So fine. So it's true. The sachir, the temporary worker, you could learn it out from a kavachomer, a fortiori. That all the more so if the permanent slave can't eat truma, then obviously the temporary one is less connected to the master, also can't eat truma, less connected to the Kohen. I could have learned it b'kavachomer, but that's okay because umilsadasi b'kavachomer tarach b'kasav lakra. Because we have an idea that sometimes something that you could learn out from a kavachomer, you could deduce it logically a fortiori, but still, sometimes tarach b'kasav lakra, the verse goes to the effort to write it anyways, and that's acceptable. It's okay to write it. If it's dealing with two different people, so it's okay to write it. But what we're really explaining is that there's no real reason to be more specific, because I could, even if it was more specific, it might have still told me both things explicitly. So it could be less explicit, and I could still figure out both things. So there's no need to be more explicit when it comes to the Ivri, because sometimes the Torah anyways will write both. It will go with the effort, even though I could deduce one from the other, it will go with the effort to write both. So that's what it did, it wrote both. It wrote them more vaguely, but that's okay, because I could figure out who it's talking about. That's with regards to the Eved Ivri. Elahacha, but over here, when it comes to the Jewish maidservant, the Amma Ivriya, going free, and it says two things. Yatzachina mein kasaf, and one teaches me she goes free at Bagrus, at 12 and a half, and one teaches me that she goes free at Nairus, at 12. It says, Chad Gufahi, she's one person. Kinafka la benairus, if she went out when she was a Naira at 12, bebagris my baya gabe, what's she still doing there when she's a bogeres, when she's 12 and a half? Meaning, if you can't apply the concept of something that you learn from a kavachomer, tarach b'kasav l'kra, still the Torah went ahead and wrote it, because it just doesn't make sense. It's not two different people. There are two different people, but here, what would it say? If the Torah was more specific, because that's really our question, is why is it speaking in vague terms? Just tell us what you're talking about. And the Torah could have said that she goes out when she's a Naira. You want to know when the Amma Ivriya goes free if nobody marries her? She goes out when she's a Naira, when she's 12. And there's nothing more to say. You don't say, and she also goes out when she's 12 and a half. She's the same person. She already went out when she was 12. So it doesn't make sense to say that it needed to say both, to know what it's talking about. So if you want to know what it's talking about, then tell us what you're talking about. Be more specific. So we're left with this question again. If she anyways goes out when she's a Naira at 12, why does the Torah also have to teach me that she goes out when she's 12 and a half, when she's a Bogeres? She already went out. Ela Amar Abaye, so therefore Abaye says a new answer. Lo nitzracha ela lebagar de ailonis. We need the verse to teach me about Bogeres who's an ailonis. An ailonis is a woman, a girl who does not develop the physical symbols, the physical makeup of a woman. She never really develops physically, and with puberty, and she's a woman who, in the end, she won't be able to have children, right? So she doesn't have the physical signs of a woman. So what happens to her? So normally a woman starts to develop these things around the age of 12. That's what Nairus is. But an ailonis never develops physically. So here she is, she's 12, and she hasn't shown any signs of puberty or physical development as a woman. So the halacha for a bogeres actually is that she skips the stage of nairus. She skips the stage of nairus, of being a naira. She remains in the status of katana, of a child, until she turns 20. And when she turns 20, she goes straight to being an adult, which is bogeres. So she goes straight to bagrus. She skips the stage of nairus. She goes straight to bagrus, to adulthood, but not until she's 20. So says the Gemara, says Abaye, Sakadai Tachamina. So I might have thought if the Torah had only said that the girl goes out when she's a naira, I might have said ben naira's tepuk. She goes out as a naira. A girl goes out when she turns 12 if she has physical development. But bagrus lo tepuk. But bagrus as a bogeres, that's not a line that she goes free. And I might have thought that the ailonis actually remains a maidservant for her whole life because she never becomes a naira and she skips right to bogeres, and bogeres doesn't go free. Kamash Malan, that's why the Torah had to tell me naira and bogeres separately. It's not talking about a regular bogeres who becomes a bogeres at 12 and a half. It's talking about the special case of an ailonis who becomes a bogeres, becomes an adult at 20. So a naira, a regular girl in a regular situation would go out at 12 if she's not married, and if the master doesn't marry her or her son. But a bogeres, a ailonis, will go out at the age of 20. Ask the Gemara, Maskifla Mar Bar Rav Ashi. Mar Bar Rav Ashi asked a question on Abaye. He said, "V'lav ka b'chomeru," but can't we deduce bogeres with a ka v'chomer, a fortiori? Umasi manin she'eng motziyim mirshus av, motziyim mirshus adon. He says, if the physical signs of a naira, those are not enough to be motzi her mirshus av, for her to leave her father's property. A naira remains the property of her father insofar as until she's 12 and a half, he still receives her maisi adayim, her profits. So in various ways, she still remains in the reshus, in the domain of her father. And yet, motziim mershus adon. And yet, as we're learning, those physical signs, turning 12, does mean that she leaves her master's house when she's a maidservant. So if simaning, if physical signs are not enough to leave the father's house, the father's domain, but they are enough to leave a master's domain, so bagur, so reaching adulthood, shemotzia mershusav, which does bring her out of the father's domain. When a girl becomes a bogeres, then she reaches adulthood, she is out of the father's domain. The father now has no control over her anymore. So, and he doesn't get her ma'asadayim, doesn't get her profits, he can't nullify her vows, right? She's completely out of his domain. Eino din shemotzia mershus adam. So don't you say all the more so? If that takes her out of her father's property, it would take her out of the master's property. And so I could figure out on my own that a bogeres goes out of the master's property. And that should be true whether it's a bogeres at 12 and a half or whether it's a bogeres at 20 of an ailonis. But still, I should know on my own that I should be able to deduce on my own that a bogeres goes out, and I shouldn't need the pasuk. So based on this question, Ela Amar Mar Bar Rav Ashi, so says Mar Bar Rav Ashi, Lo nitzracha elo le'ikr zvina da'ionis. You know why I need the verse to teach me about a bogeres and to teach me about an ailonis? I need it to teach me that the sale of an ailonis as a maidservant is valid in the first place. Because I might have thought the asya simane nairis have zvina. If a girl eventually develops the signs of a naira, the physical maturity of a woman, so then I would say that the original sale that her father made, that's a good sale, and now that she's 12, she goes out free. But an ailonis who never develops the physical qualities of a woman, I might have said lo have zvina zvina, that the original sale that the father made was never a sale, and it's invalidated by the fact that she never grows into a naira. And the Ritzvah explains the reason I might say this is because here she never became a naira. Now she's going to remain a maidservant until she's 20. Well, maybe the Torah wasn't setting her up for that. Maybe it was only had in mind to keep a girl a maidservant until 12, but not longer than that. So says the Gemara, top of the next page, Kamash Malan, comes the pasuk v'yatzachinam ein kasef, that she goes out whether she's a naira or whether she's a bogeres, and meaning an ailonis, and that itself teaches me that an ailonis was a valid sale, that it was valid to sell her as a maidservant, even though she never developed those physical qualities. And so says Mar Bar Rav Ashi, that's what it's for. It's not to teach me that when she becomes a bogeres, that she leaves the master's house. That I have to figure out on my own. if a naira leaves the master's house, right? If a naira who doesn't leave her father's house when she becomes a naira, but yet we know that she leaves the master's house when she becomes a naira as a maidservant, so a bogeres, someone who reaches adulthood who does leave her father's domain, certainly she should leave the master's domain. So I don't need the verse to teach me bogeres, so rather what's it teaching me? It's teaching me that the sale was valid in the first place. That's according to Mar Bar Ashi. Asks the Gemara, top of the page, middle of the line, Ulamar Bar Ashi da Amar. But Mar Bar Ashi, who asked this question and had to come up with this new explanation for the purpose of teaching the Ilonis and Bogeres, he asked, Velav Kal V'chomeru, isn't it a Kal V'chomer? I can figure out that Bogeres goes out on my own. But didn't we say before Ha'amrinon, didn't we just say it previously in the Gemara that Milsa da Asya B'Kal V'chomer Tarach B'Kasav L'Akra, that that's okay, that we learn in Kal V'chomer, and that sometimes the Torah, even though you can learn something from a Kal V'chomer, still the Torah will go with the effort to write it anyways. So what was he asking? Why do you need to write Bogeres? I can learn it from a Kal V'chomer. We just learned before, when we were talking about Toshav and Sachar, the Eved Ivri, the Jewish slave who doesn't eat Truma, right? We just learned before that sometimes the Torah goes to the effort to write something even though you could deduce it logically. So what kind of a question is Mar Bar Ashi asking? That isn't it a Kal V'chomer? Yeah, it's a Kal V'chomer, but still the Torah still wrote it. So the Gemara says, Hanimili, that which we say, that which we fall back basically on, this concept of the Torah went to the effort, even though it's a Kal V'chomer, even though it's a fortiori learned out, that's Deleko Lishnuya. That's where you don't have an answer for why it's necessary there. But if you have an answer, like Mar Bar Ashi did, he had an explanation for why it was necessary to still write Ein Kasef and to teach me Bogeres, to teach me that the sale of the islandess is good in the first place. So if you have a good answer, then you give a good answer. If you don't have an answer, then yeah, it's safe to fall back on the idea of something that's learning a Kal V'chomer, the Torah still went to the effort to write. Gemara continues at the two dots. It says, V'tana maisi lamehacha. Now a different Tana learned the idea that you can be Mekadesh with Kesef. We're going back to the question. We had Kesef Minalar. How do we know that you can be Mekadesh, a woman, with money? So another Tana learned it, another sage learned it from the following. Detanya, we have a brisa. Ki yikach ish isha, the verse says when a man takes a wife, uba'ala, and he lives with her, v'haya, and let's say she doesn't find favor in his eyes, ki matzah ba'er bastaver, the pasuk says he finds something improper with her, then it goes in there, talks about the concept of divorce. Now, but the beginning of the verse, that's where we see the language that's used of ki yikach ish isha, when a man takes a wife, and it's described with the verse kach, to take, and we say en kicha ela bekesef. Kicha is done with kesef, like we sang on the first amad. Kicha mistei Ephron, and we learn Gzeira Shava from stei Ephron. Kicha is with kesef, with money. V'cheinu omer, and so it says by stei Ephron, by the fields of Ephron. When Avram buys the field from Ephron, it says nasati kesef hasadeh kach mimeni. I've given the kesef, the money for the field. Kach mimeni, take it from me. And it has the word kach associated with a sale using kesef, using money. So too here, the taking of a wife can be done through money. Ask the Gemara, or maybe the Brisa itself, why do I need to learn it from there? V'halo dinhu. I can learn it out from a Kal V'chomer. Uma ama ha'ivriya, she'ena niknas b'bia, niknas b'kesef. I can tell you the following. I could say, an Alma Ivriya, a Jewish maidservant, she cannot be acquired bibia. You can't acquire a Jewish maidservant through bia, through sexual intercourse, and yet niknas bekesef, but she is acquired through money. That right, b'chim kor ish esbi talama. When a man will sell his daughter as a maidservant, she could be acquired with money, but not through bia. So a wife, sheniknis b'bia, who could be acquired through bia, that's one of the three things that the Mishnah said, and the Gemara will later bring a source for it, but it's sourced and it's true, that a man can be mekadesh, a woman, with intercourse. Eino din shetikna b'kesef. isn't it a kavachomer? Can't we say all the more so that she should be able to be acquired with money? If an amma ivriya who can't be acquired with bia could be acquired with money, so a wife who could be acquired with bia, all the more so that she should be able to be acquired with money. So the Gemara says, Yevama tochiach. No, Yevama can come to disprove this, because we see by Yevama that that's not always true. Sheniknis bebia, because a Yevama does have the quality that she could be acquired with bia. That's how a person does yibum, through intercourse. That's how he marries the Yevama. Ve'ena niknis bekesef. And yet she can't be acquired with kesef, with money. The one way to do yibum is through intercourse. That's how yibum is done. So, and not with money. You can't do like Kiddushin with money. It doesn't work by yibum. So you see that there are areas in the Torah where a woman or something could be taken through bia, but not through money. So too maybe a regular wife. Maybe it can only be done through bia, but not through money. So that kavachomer falls away. But to that we respond no. Mala Yevama shekain ein niknis bishtar. No, because Yevama we see is different. Yevama, there's no concept even of a kinyan of acquiring her through a shtar. It's only through bia. Tomar bezu sheniknis bishtar, as opposed to a kiddushin, could be a wife could be acquired with shtar, with a document. That was the other thing in the Mishnah. That has its own source, a separate source. So you can't disprove from Yevama. Meaning we want to say if a wife could be acquired through bia, then certainly she could be acquired through money. We say no, because a Yevama could be acquired through bia, and yet she can't be acquired through money. Yeah, but we're going to say Yevama is different because she can't either be acquired with shtar, with a document. So she's her own category. You can't prove anything from there. But a woman who could be acquired with a shtar, she's different than a Yevama. So if a wife could be acquired through bia, then certainly she should be able to be acquired through money. And again, that's based on the Amma Ivriya. The Amma Ivriya, the Jewish maidservant, cannot be acquired with bia, and yet she could be acquired with money. So all the more so, a regular wife who could be acquired through bia, because that has its own source, should be able to be acquired through money. And that's where I could learn it from. So the Gemara is asking, it's back to its question, why do I need the verse of, why do I need to learn it from Kicha Mistei Ephron? Why do I have to learn it from Stei Ephron that you can learn it, that you can be Mekadesh with money? I can learn it from a Kavachomer. Now, the Brisa ends off in a strange way. The Brisa says, Talmud Lomar, that's why the Torah says, Kikach Ish. That's why it says Kikach when a man takes a wife. And it seems to be saying, that's why we have the Gezerah Shava. That's why I have to learn from Stei Ephron, Kicha Mistei Ephron, that you can be acquired with money. Now, if you're following, that doesn't make sense, because we just actually proved that you could learn it from a Kavachomer, and you don't need the pasuk of Kikach. You don't need that Gezerah Shava. We can learn it from a Kavachomer. So the Gemara asks, Halam Alikra. Why is it ending off and saying we can learn it from the verse? Why do I need that? I actually just said that we can learn it from a Ha'asyala. I've learned it out from a Kavachomer. So Amar Ravashi says, Mishum De'ikol Meimar, because you can say Meikara Dedina Pircha. In the very Kavachomer itself, there's a problem. Without bringing in Yevama, without bringing outside questions, in the Kavachomer itself, there's a problem. The Kavachomer is no good, and that's why I need the pasuk. Why is the Kavachomer no good? Because Mehecha Kamaisisla, where are you trying to learn from Amma Ivriya? You're trying to learn from Amma Ivriya, from a Jewish maidservant, and you're saying if a Jewish maidservant cannot be acquired with bia, but she could be acquired with kesef, so a wife who could be acquired with bia, all the more so it should work to acquire her with kesef. Says the Gemara, no. Because Mala Amma Ivriya shkein yotza b'kesef. Amma Ivriya is different because we know that Amma Ivriya can actually go free with kesef also. In the middle of her term, she can, before she's 12 even, she could redeem herself with money. If she gets money, she could redeem herself. Or somebody could help redeem her with money. But she could be redeemed from her servitude through kesef. So just like she could leave with kesef, she could be acquired with kesef. Tomar bezu, as opposed to a wife, she'ena yotza b'kesef. She cannot go out with money. There's one way for a wife, besides for the husband dying, to go out from being a wife is through a get, through a divorce bill. But that's it. You can't use kesef. She can't buy her way out. So therefore, you can't learn from Amma Ivriya. Amma Ivriya, maybe it works to acquire with kesef because we also see that she could go out with kesef. But a wife who can't go out with kesef, maybe also you can't acquire her with kesef. Talmud Lomar ki yikach ish. That's why I need the pasuk ki yikach ish. I have to learn it from Stay Ephron, kicha mistay Ephron. That you can use kesef. Now, at this point, we seem to have two sources for the fact that you can be Makadish with kesef. We have what we just said from the Gzera Shava from Stay Ephron, kicha mistay Ephron, and we have what we learned about last week and what we've been talking about earlier, v'yatza chinam ein kasef. She goes out free. There's no kesef, and we learned last weck ein kesef l'adam zeh yesh kesef l'adam acher. There's no kesef when she goes out. There's no money that goes to the master when she leaves, when the Jewish maidservant leaves his domain. But there is money in a different situation where a girl leaves the domain of her master, meaning her father, that he can get money for her Kiddushin when she leaves his domain. So we have two sources. So why do we need both? Says the Gemara, I need the verse of v'yatza chinam, she goes out free in kasef, and I need this verse of ki yikach ish, of kicha. Di kasav rachmana ki yikach. If I only had the verse of ki yikach, hava amina, I might have said kiddushin diyav labal didahavu. I might have said that even for a naira, if the man gives her kiddushin, that goes to her. Kasav rachmana v'yatza chinam. That's why I need that other verse, v'yatza chinam ein kasef, that there's no money to this master, but there is to that master, that the money goes to the father. At least when she's a naira, even though she can accept the kiddushin, but it will go to the father. V'i kasav rachmana v'yatza chinam. And if the Torah had said only the verse of the Yatza Chinam of the maidservant, and we were learning Kiddushin from there, that the father gets it, that you can be Makadish with Kasef, with money, Hava Amina, I would have thought, Hecha diyava lei'ihi l'didei v'kidashta habikidushi. I might have thought that as well, if she would give her husband Kiddushin money, that should also work. Because I would see that Kiddushin, it revolves around money, but I don't necessarily see that it's in one direction, that it's specifically from the husband to the wife. I just learned from there that there's kesef in a different situation, where she goes out from her father's domain, that there could be kesef over there. That if it comes from the husband, it would go to the father, but maybe it could also go from her to the husband. I just see that kesef works. Kasav rachmana ki yikach. That's why I need this verse. Ki yikach ish isha. When a man takes a wife, below ki sigach. It doesn't say when she takes a husband. It says when he takes a wife, to show that the kiddushin has to come from him. That's why I need two sources. That's why I need this source as well, for the idea that one can be makadish with kasef, and because this one teaches me additionally that not just does kiddushin work with kasef, but that kasef, that money, has to come from the husband to the wife.